Hey everyone, and welcome to Murderous True Crime Stories. Um, a little bit about this podcast. I decided that I wanted to do a deeper dive and explore the fascination with true crime stories. Lizzie Borden, of course, got me started in this, and she was a woman allegedly who killed her stepmother and father brutally with a hatchet, and it was one of the most horrible, brutal crime scenes of the century, the 19th century. And in fact, I wrote a book about it called Inadmissible: The Case of Lizzie Borden and Other Murderous Women. And I found those stories very similar. So when solving a crime, you always have to do the 6 W's: the who, what, where, why, how, and when. And actually, there's an H in there, which describes the method used to carry out the crime. In Lizzie Borden's case, and with the methods they had in that time in the 1800s, the crime was never solved. So we're all curious about the motivation behind that crime and, the complicated mind and what transforms you into a killer. So today, with this first podcast, I have a very special guest with me, and his name is Chad Miller, and he's an author, and he has some pretty amazing books out there. The Confession, which is based loosely on the Lizzie Borden story, and we will get to that, and also some other books. But when he posted that book in my Facebook page, my group, I was immediately fascinated, and I read the book in like a day and a half, and I might say that it's a really quick read, and I was really impressed. And Chad, sorry, welcome to the
Thank you.
podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to start off and ask you, how did you first find out about the Lizzie Borden story?
Well, of course, I've heard of Lizzie Borden, and I knew the nursery rhyme, and I was loosely familiar with the case. And I've always had an interest in serial killers and murders and true crime as well throughout history. Contemporary and going back, far back into history. But I listen to a podcast. It's called Stuff You Should Know, and they go like any subject. There's not one particular subject. But when they picked Lizzie Borden as the subject for the show, I was really enthralled by the case. And what I loved most about it, and as I saw them, were the characters, the people in the story. And I thought these would make great characters in a book, especially the father. That he's the one that really grabbed my attention first. Um, and just like, for example, in real life, he thought that Lizzie Borden, and she probably did, stole from the local general store, and throughout
Hmm.
town, she was a pickpocket or a thief.
Well, I think she was a
Um,
kleptomaniac.
right.
Yeah.
So to teach her a lesson or to control it, at the end of every night he would empty his pockets and put his change upon the mantle and count each coin before he went to bed. And the ritual was in the morning he would collect the money and count them again, make sure every penny or every coin was accounted for. So like little stories like that, I thought were very interesting and were great scenes for a book.
How did how
And
did
of
you
course,
how did you find out about those stories though? Like, did you read? Because when I was reading your book, I found I just thought you were very well researched about certain aspects of that crime, and unless you're a really hardcore Lizzie Borden fan, you really wouldn't know a lot about that. So, like, how did you go about studying in order to write this book?
well, there's a couple different things that I did. So before I wrote the book, about a year before, I had the idea, and I had sat with the idea for about a year, and that's when I did a lot of my research. I read a couple books,
Do you remember which
some
ones?
fiction. One was called, I think, "The Case of Lizzie Borden,"
Okay.
or the trials of the trial of Lizzie Borden.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one other book I forget the title of. I saw the movie, of course, the one with
Elizabeth
um,
Montgomery.
Elizabeth Montgomery. Yeah, that's the
Okay.
better of the two. I also did some research online. Um, I watched a lot of podcasts on it. There was one podcast, I forget the name. Yeah, because don't follow a lot of podcasts and watch every episode.
Mm-hmm.
But one of them, they stayed in the Lizzie Borden house,
Okay.
and then I did that myself. I during a couple summers ago, I went by myself. No one was brave enough to go with me, and I spent the night alone at the Lizzie Borden house, and then took the tour. um, the tour, I'm not sure how much is definitely historically accurate, or how much is pandering to the
Mm-hmm.
story. But I
What
found
room?
some good.
What room did you
What room?
stay in?
I stayed in the maid's room in the attic.
Okay. So tell me about the
So
tour. I'm sorry I interrupted you. I just was curious.
no, no,
But
no,
go
that's
ahead.
fine. The
Yeah.
tour was good. I found out some cool information. Some of it I found corroboration in my research, and some I have not. But like certain, like I try to pick out little scenes or little pieces of information that might not be really important to the case itself,
Mm-hmm.
but would make good drama or a good trinket to throw in the book. For example, the lead medical examiner dug up one of the bodies. I forget uh, whether it was Abby Borden or Mr. Borden, but dug up one of the bodies and decapitated the head. And then wanted to study the wounds in the back of the head from the
Right.
hatchet.
Mm-hmm.
So they couldn't get the skin off, so he boiled the skin off the head
Yes.
to study the skeleton.
Mm-hmm.
And just like little stories like that, I found very interesting. And I mean, they made it into the book. And others, my version of the story is definitely not. It's not a true historical account at all. I throw in a lot of fiction in there, but
Right.
I pepper.
But okay, so I have an example of a little piece of your book, and it's quote: "The natural thing to ball up your jacket and use it as a pillow. For most, maybe, but Frederick Strohmeyer, the man was
Yes,
peculiar. He's the most frugal man I've ever met. He probably bought that jacket 20 years ago and expected it to last 20 more. He wouldn't just ball it up and risk a rip or tear. So in the true Lizzie Borden story, they found Mr. Borden on the couch with his jacket or his coat
hmm
rolled up in a ball and placed under his head. And you
right,
mentioned that in your story, and that's what got me going. I'm like, oh yeah, he's mentioning this, like, and there's something to be said about that with Lizzie Borden. Actually, if she did the crime, she could have wore his jacket or his coat,
right,
backwards, and
right,
did the kill and then roll it up and put it under his head. That's an
or,
ongoing theory.
right, and
So
that's
how
one
she
of
protected
the
herself. Yeah,
right. That's one of the holes in the case, because when they found her, she didn't have a drop of blood on her.
exactly. Yeah.
So yes, that is one of the theories. Yes, she could have wore the jacket like you said, because it's going to get blood on it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then discarded it. I don't know if they mentioned this in. I don't remember whether I came up with the theory of why he wouldn't ball it up, because he in real life he was a very frugal man, like
Yes.
painfully frugal.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't see him in real life, you know, taking a clothing garment and just
Well,
using
yeah,
it
he
as a
wouldn't want
pillow.
to waste something like that. Waste
Right.
it.
So
Yeah.
I within his character, I didn't see that true to his character. So that's how it made it. At least that part made it into the book. I mean, I don't believe they had plumbing in the house or electricity in the house when.
They had a heater though. They had heat to heat the house. Like if you go in the house, I don't know if you remember that radiator in the hallway when
Yeah.
you walk in the
Yeah.
front door. So they did have some things that were very accommodating to them. It
But the
wasn't
layout of the house was very peculiar. When you go
they
upstairs, there's no hallway. Each bedroom leads into the next bedroom.
Yeah, I think they
So
called it
that was
like a railroad or a train car kind of
right.
layout. Yeah.
Right.
So
And
yeah.
the master bedroom had its own private stairwell, and that's the only, that was only function. The stairwell was for that one bedroom.
Hmm.
So the layout of the house is very peculiar. So I thought it made the house itself, hopefully in the book, acted as its own character. I tried to convey that.
Oh yeah, definitely. So the way the house is laid out, and the times of the murders, they were like almost an hour apart, would make it very
Right.
difficult for an outsider to come in and murder Abby Borden first and wait an hour, and then Mr. Borden wasn't expected home. He felt ill and he came home early.
Right.
So for him to be killed, uh, Lizzie was the only one in the house for both murders. Uh, for both
What about the
murders,
maid? Was the
the
maid,
maid
because
was
the maid,
outside for Abby's murder. She was outside
right? She
washing
was washing the
windows.
windows.
Yeah,
Washing the
so she
windows.
had an alibi for Abby. So if you want to say that the murder was done by the same person, then that would rule her out because she wasn't in the house for the first one.
Right.
Lizzie was the
I
only
think
one
the
in the
only
house for
real
both of them.
she could have aided it. I mean, I think in my mind, Lizzie had the means, the time, and the motivation for the murders. You almost can empathize with their situation.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe Maggie or the maid aided her in real life. That's a working theory that they might have been lovers or very close, intimate friends. Um, so maybe she aided her. I find it hard to believe that she didn't know about it. Um,
Hmm. But back
but in
then,
my mind, I think
women in that society, if there's a secret to be kept, they're very good secret keepers.
right,
Because it was a patriarchal society. So they didn't share a lot of things that they knew back then, amongst friends, so to speak.
right.
They
And she
would,
kind of disappeared afterwards. After the case, the maid kind of just
yeah, I think she was really freaked out about the whole thing. I
of course,
don't believe she was really in on it because she left the house the day of the murders, I believe, and
right.
went across.
Bridget was her name, I believe.
Yeah,
Right?
Bridget.
Was it Bridget?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of speculation and theories, for everyone involved with
Oh,
that.
and the uncle too. The
Yeah,
uncle was interesting. How his alibi was like very precise, very specific, very detailed. Like no one could remember those
with
details.
the
I
train
think he remembered
car.
like
Yeah,
the train car number. Yeah. So that was interesting too. Maybe he was just freaked out and just was making stuff up, but I don't know. But
no, I think
in
I
my
think it
mind,
was. Go ahead. Yeah.
I think it almost has to be um, uh, Lizzie. It almost
Hmm.
has to be.
Yeah. How did you feel when you were in the house? Did you walk through the house and sort of like imagine the murders and like place yourself in different strategic areas to sort of figure out if it's possible that
Yeah, I
that
went
she
up
could
and
have done it?
down between the floors. I think it would benefit the murder to be completely alone. If there was anyone else in the house to witness it or to try to evade someone, it would be really difficult
Yeah.
just because of the layout of the house. I did it at night, which the murders obviously didn't happen at night, but it was really eerie, and I
Yeah.
played into like
Creepy.
the horror aspect of it. So I did it in the middle of the night. It was really cool. They told me not to go in the basement, but of course I didn't listen. I went in the
Yeah, of
basement too.
course.
Of
I
course I did.
find the steps are really steep in that house too,
They
right?
were steep,
Yeah.
yeah. They had another additional tour in the basement. They said that there was like a stain in the back wall that looked like a woman that should was a ghost.
Okay.
That I don't
They
know
were
if I
really
believed in
playing
that.
it up, huh, with the ghost?
Yeah, they were. So that the
Yeah.
basement wasn't as cool as I thought it would be. But the murder rooms that's where they came for.
Yeah.
The guest bedroom where Abby was murdered, and of course, the epic, infamous couch scene. One of the questions I asked the tour guide was it that the original couch because it looked like it,
Yeah.
but it wasn't. It
No.
wasn't. He said that
Mm.
after the house, a lot of people, thieving was a problem, so they believe
Yeah.
someone stole
So,
the
if
original
you
couch.
ever get a chance to visit Fall River again, you should make a stop at the Fall River Historical Society because it'll give you a new perspective of just how tiny the hatchet is. Like,
Yeah,
you think of an axe, not an axe. This was a little handheld hatchet that you could really, even a woman, take that momentum and just like hit somebody's head with it. Like
Right,
it,
and
yeah,
that's another reason why I think she did it is because you could tell by the brutality of the murders there was rage behind it.
yeah,
It wasn't a random act. It wasn't necessarily a disgruntled worker or a thief. Someone who's trying to rob the house. Someone
right.
hated them. Someone hated Abby, and someone hated um, Mr. Borden.
I really appreciate the research that you put into this, because by talking to you, you're pretty spot on with everything. And I've talked to many people that really didn't know, like, that didn't do the homework. But when I was reading your book, The Confession, the way you did the characters in the story, the way you told it, and the things that I'm not going to give it away, but the things that you put in the story, to know that you did the research of Lizzie Borden's, like, story. I really totally appreciate that. And the ending of it has, quite a twist to it, which I really thought was very clever. And I really enjoyed it. I have to say,
Oh, thank you.
and very entertaining, very entertaining. And
No,
I
thank
have
you.
a friend of mine who's on this podcast right now, Rusty Judd, who is a Lizzie Borden fan. He's always on the Elizabeth site. He's reading it right now, and I've sort of been drilling him. Well, how's it going? And and he's liking it. He's liking it, so that's good.
Nice,
He's still
nice.
reading it. See, he said he's still reading it, but yeah, he's gonna let me know. He's gonna let me know. And this is a hardcore Lizzie Borden fan, so I'll let
Okay,
you
yeah,
know,
let me
Chad. I'll let
know.
you know.
Once you find out, let me know. I'm very curious.
So I want to move on to another book, which I just found amazing, and in an unusual way. As a writer, I was reading it and I'm like, oh, first of all, the book is called Prisoner of Despair,
Mhm,
and you write it in a format of people's diaries.
mhm,
And this is how you tell the story, like in a first person, of a person writing in their diary. And
right,
it's not only one, it's a lot of characters. And it's
right,
based in the
multiple
eight
point of views.
multiple, yeah, and it's based in the 1800s, which makes sense because there were no computers back then. They would write, a lot of people wrote in diaries back then.
Yeah, the 1800s, for whatever reason, I love the literature from that period. Some of my favorite books came out of the 1800s, and that's what led me into this writing style. It's called epistolary writing style. This telling the story through
What
diary
is
entries or letters.
Okay.
Epistolary.
Okay. I have to
Yeah, that's
look that up.
look up. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
And it's from my favorite book. My favorite book is written in this way, Dracula, which is again based in the 1800s. So part of it was at least the theme or the voices, the way it's told. I tried to want to give the nod to Bram Stoker because that book is brilliant in my mind.
Hmm.
And another author that inspired this book is Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote Sherlock Holmes. So there's two investigators, the lead investigator and his grumpy friend, are kind of my versions or my nods to Watson and Holmes. So I try to combine the book, those two themes, those two ideas, those two feelings together in one book to create Prisoner of Despair in my books.
So I just, like, the book is a twisting murder mystery also. and
Yes.
and there's a lot of things going on and a lot of different perspectives. How do you stay in the characters' lanes when there's that many characters?
That was the difficult thing, and that's the one thing I was nervous about not conveying. I didn't want to write it into one voice because that's the trap you fall into. You have your own voice in the head. So I wanted to give each character their own voice and have when the reader reads their section or their their diary entry that with each new diary entry, with each new point of view, you feel that it's a totally different voice, a totally different character.
Right.
So when writing it, let's say I finished one diary entry, I wouldn't just jump into the next one. I would edit that version and edit it, and once that was done, that little piece, I would give it a day or two before moving to the next piece to try to get into that character's head and try to find their voice again. But the in between, the avenue or the pathway to get to those plot points happen organically. Like the character, my favorite character that I've ever written, Scarlet in from Prisoner. She was supposed to be like a throwaway character,
Mm-hmm.
but as I wrote, she just had a voice of her own, and she kind of took it over,
Yeah.
and she became, the one of the main characters, if not the main character of the book.
Yeah, well, you have a gift because you actually kept the mystery going right up to the end of the story. And I
I hope.
really didn't know like who done it supposedly. You know, who was responsible for what was going on. And I say this in vague terms because I don't want to give away any of the story. I
Right.
have some friends who have book clubs out in Jersey, and I suggest that they had a bad run with their last book. Nobody really liked it, so I
Mhm.
suggest that you pick this one up.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, Prisoner of Despair. Pick this one up by Chad Miller and read this book, and get together with your. You should see these guys. I was amazed. I was on Facebook. I'm like, what the heck? They had like 15 people in their house with this book club. Like, and a big spread of food out on the table, and they were having a great old time. And I love that because, first of all, you're reading something really good. Second of all, you're getting together. You're
Yeah.
socializing, and which is a
And
miss.
you're talking about it and,
Yeah,
having opinions about it and,
right.
oh, little nuggets that one person may have picked up on that would flesh out the story or make it more meaningful that the other person didn't catch up on. So yeah, reading the
Yeah,
same book or together with a group of people is it's a great thing. Yeah,
yeah,
I agree.
it's really cool. So let's talk about your newest book you just put out. You just dropped it.
It's a weird genre. It's definitely a niche genre. It's
It
a
is it a
Western horror.
thriller?
So yeah, thriller. There is some horror elements. There's some, gore and things like that.
Okay.
Some scary parts to it, but it's a Western horror thriller based on Greek mythology. So it's
So
definitely a mishmash.
it says the sheriff, the what is it, Gimp,
The, the Gimp
and
and
the
the Queen of the
Queen of
Underworld.
the Underworld. Okay.
Yes. So those are the three
What a
heads.
mix! What a
Those are the
mix!
three heads.
Yeah, the it and the ego and the super ego,
Right. Right.
maybe.
So there, and each character is very different. But like I said, they kind of want the same thing in the end. But they don't know it, and they don't even know what they want.
Yeah,
So it's definitely, I wanted it to be like a spaghetti western, very tense, very
yeah.
bloody, very gory,
Hmm.
very fast-paced action, almost like a 180 from Prisoner of Despair.
Yeah,
Prisoner of
I must
Despair is
say,
like
yeah.
almost like a puzzle that you have to piece together. It's a little bit of a slow build, but you reach that crescendo, you reach that boom in the end. But
Hmm.
it's a slow build, and you have to piece it together yourself. This is a punch in the gut, a punch in the gut, a punch in the gut. So it's fast-paced, bloody, and fun. It's a fun book.
Good. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I think your books are very different. They stand on their own in very different styles and ways. I mean, Prisoner of Despair is written very different because it's written through a diary format than the
Right.
confession. And now it sounds like this new book is like a very different experience too. I mean, it's great, that you can like put yourself in these characters in very different ways. I'll tell you, I really enjoy your books a lot,
Oh,
and
thank
I
you.
read though the two probably in like 4 days, like
Wow.
maybe 5 days, yeah.
And if you
So,
notice on all the covers of the book, there's a little sticker or a little brand on there called the Founders Universe. And the reason
mhm.
I did that is because they all exist in the same universe, all the books. So there is some loose connections, and some of the books are major connections within the books. So if you read one and one genre might not be for you, a western might not be for you, it may intrigue the reader because there might be a little nugget that might show up in the confession, or it might be like, oh, I remember that from the confession, or from Prison of Despair, how they're interconnected.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. I'll keep that in mind.
Like
Uh,
for example, in A Prison of Despair, Thomas Bram is scolding his niece Scarlett because she wants to be involved in his cases, and he reminds her of the incident of the incident that happened before, and it was a very bad incident that happened between Scarlett and Thomas,
mhm.
and that happens to be the subject of my next novel, the novel I'm working on now.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. What's next?
What's next is a book called Loose Ends.
Okay.
So it is a book about a serial killer, and many of the characters from The Confession and also from Prisoner of Despair are all in this book. So
Does it
it's
take
definitely,
place in the 1800s also?
yeah, a year after The Confession. So
Okay.
yes. But I promise, the book that's coming next after Loose Ends is gonna go back in time. It's gonna go back to the 1600s, late 1600s.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going back in time.
I just wrote a short story based in the 1500s
Mm,
called Not for the Faint of Heart. And I last year did an anthology, a collection with Staten Island writers and, short stories. And this short story, it's based on a true story of a young girl named Beatrice, who's 16 years old, that gets beheaded in Rome
mm.
for killing her father, but her father, was sexually assaulting her, and she had enough, so she killed him. And even if it was self defense or something, they beheaded her along with her entire family.
Oh
So it's
wow.
this really intense story, and I'm always interested in women, and women in society, and so I took that story. It's based on a true story, but I put a spin on it, and it's about the relationship between the executioner and her,
Mm,
and how he
mm.
feels about beheading her. But anyway, I really enjoyed talking with you, Chad. I think your books are amazing. I think the confession is spot on. With the research you put into it, and I'm sure with any of your books, you seem like you do a lot of research to make it correct, so to speak.
As
Even
much as I
though,
can,
yeah.
yeah. And that's why it means so much coming from you, saying those kind of words about the confession, because wanted to do the history, and especially Lizzie Borden,
Hmm.
true justice. I wanted to get the story, or at least some of the details right, too, because I didn't want to tarnish that story, tarnish her name, because it's such a captivating tale, and I wanted to put my own spin on it. I just didn't want to retell it. I wanted to put my own spin on it, but I also wanted to do the real story, the real people in the story
Hmm.
justice. So that means a
Well,
lot coming from you.
yeah, you certainly did, but you did that. But you put your own spin on it, and you made it very entertaining for a reader whom even doesn't know about Lizzie Borden, just to
Right.
read the story, and it's great. So it accomplishes two things. It makes Lizzie Borden fans happy, and uh, and it makes non Lizzie Borden people happy also, because it's just a
Yeah.
great story with a really cool twist at the end, and really well written, edited. Kudos to you. So I look
Thank
forward to reading more, and I'll definitely let you know about
Yes.
like,
Yes.
or and I'll let you know if the book club's gonna get your book. I'm gonna put them on the
All
spot.
right. All right. Awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a pleasure, and maybe when your new book comes out, we'll do this again.
Okay. Sounds great.
So Thank you very much. And to everyone out there who's watching, the Lizzie Borden fans, thanks for tuning in. And until next time, we'll see you then.